And I'd flown up to Sydney especially for this meeting, and I was totally in that business running out of money, and I needed to close an investor like then and there.
Yeah.
And I remember them saying to me, no, we can't make this decision now. We'll have to come back in about 5 months' time because there was some restructure. There was a restructure of their fund at Macquarie Bank.
Okay.
And it just wasn't for them then. And I was just devastated. I remember actually going down the escalators at 1 Shelley Street crying, going, oh my God, it's just all over, it's done. And I was just so upset because I thought this little baby that I'd created, this business that I just wanted to see fly, I just thought at that point, I'm going to have to close it because I can't afford to fund it and run it and do this sort of stuff because it just wasn't working.
Hello and welcome to Trillions. I'm your host, Alyse Grace, and today I'm chatting with Jon Ellis, founder and CEO of Investorist, which currently has $25 billion worth of inventory on its marketplace. It's an online business-to-business sales platform promoting and distributing off-plan and pre-construction residential properties around the globe. Jon has raised $9 million for this venture and already has 4 international offices. On the podcast, he shares plenty of stories and tips most businesses can benefit from. This episode of Trillions is sponsored by Xenox Diamonds. Mention my name or the Trillions podcast and they will give you a free upgrade to platinum with any engagement or wedding ring purchase. Find them in Brisbane or order online. More details in the description below.
Well, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast, Jon Ellis.
Thanks very much for having me, Alyse.
You're welcome. So, Jon, you're the CEO and founder of Investorist, which is some online software and marketplace. Can you tell us a bit more about what exactly Investorist is?
Yeah, sure. Effectively, we help property developers sell their flats. That's really what we do, and help builders sell house and land packages. That's our goal. We do that in 2 different ways. One way is we have a piece of software that powers their businesses. So you might see on a range of developer websites, agent login.
Yep.
That's us for about 300 companies around the world, including some massive organisations like Colliers in the UK, Chesterton's, and a heap of developers. And the other way we do that is through a marketplace. So most industries, like banking, for mortgages, they have a marketplace. Well, we power the marketplace for off-plan property.
Very cool.
For businesses to log into.
Yeah. So where did the number 9,000 come from? You guys had access to 9,000 different...
So we've got 9,000 agencies now that use our platform to find inventory to sell to their clients. So we've got offices in Australia, UK, USA and China. Mm-hmm. And around the world, there's about 9,000 different companies that log into Investorist, search for property, find it, and recommend it to their clients. So
awesome.
At the moment in Australia alone, we've got $25 billion worth of inventory on our marketplace.
Wow.
And last year we recorded just over 4,200 sales. So a lot of property moving through the marketplace.
Very cool. And in residential sales, the agents are making between 1.5 to 3% commission, and then off the plan is usually around 6%. So how does the business model work? Do you guys make that 6% commission? How do you guys make your money?
Yeah, so we don't make that 6% commission. That would be nice. We make our money. Well, we actually do make money out of commission in some instances. So we've got 3 different revenue streams in our business. One is software. So those companies that use our agent login technology, they pay us a licensing fee and a monthly fee based on users. So it's a normal SaaS model. In our marketplace, we actually charge a fee per connection. So it's a little bit like Tinder for off-plan property developers.
Yeah, cool.
We charge them based on the number of dates we deliver them.
Yeah.
And then the third part of our business is Investorist Concierge, where we actually help the developers to manage those sales, and then we charge a commission. But it's not 6%. Unfortunately, it's only 1%. The balance of that goes to the agents.
Yeah, that's okay. That's still something. That's a really cool model. So give us a bit about your background, and then we'll jump into how you came up with the Investorist model. I'm really keen for the audience to hear your background, Jon, and where you came from and how you got to the point that you're at now.
Cool. Well, I grew up in a town called Albury, which is a town on the border of New South Wales and Victoria. I moved to Melbourne when I was 21 and started working for a law firm called Clayton Utz in their marketing department. And my area of specialisation there was construction of major projects. So I was helping win tenders for things like one of the toll roads in Brisbane actually was one of the things that I worked on. And then just got to like the industry. Worked at Mirvac as their marketing manager. Loved property, and then I started my own advertising agency when I was 26. I actually had a big fight with my boss. He pounded his fist on the table and told me that I worked for him. And I, being a bit of a hothead, explained that I didn't work for him anymore, and I left. I think I used some fairly non-choice words, and so I was actually escorted from the building by security guards. Fun times. And then I suppose at 26, I sort of realised that I didn't really want to work for anyone anymore. It wasn't really my vision, and I wanted to work for myself. So I started consulting to Cbus Property, was my very first client, and I consulted to them on a building in Melbourne.
So were you doing marketing and advertising for sales agents and for the sale of properties?
Yeah,
for your agency?
Yeah,
okay,
I was.
Cool. Yeah.
So I was running marketing for a building that had completed. It was a residential project on the corner of Exhibition Street and Flinders Lane. Flinders Lane in Melbourne, called Herald Living for Cbus. And then I just kept picking up clients. So I think I probably did a fairly good job for them. And then more clients, and it was basically word of mouth. And I kept employing people to grow that business. And at its peak, the business was called Extension Co. And at its peak, we had 24 staff. And we're probably one of the bigger advertising and marketing agencies in Australia for the property industry.
Cool. And you told me yesterday you exited from that business. I can't remember how many years ago. And then that led you on
about two and a half years ago. And that was really to focus on Investorist. So during that ad agency journey, I built a number of little microsites for different property developers, about 100 of them to be exact. And a lot of them had little agent login buttons on the back, which was at the day like a glorified Excel spreadsheet. So agents would log in. Usually their passwords were like agent. It was really very, very basic. And they'd be able to download price lists and availability and some documents. So it was really, really simple stuff. And then we went on to build a bigger version of that. And I bought an agency called Lettuce Digital to do that. And we built some technology. It was still very basic, but it was a lot better than what we had before. We started licensing that out to different companies. And I had about six different developers and project marketers using that software. And I realized that, hey, there's probably a bigger business in this, and I should look at developing that. And that was about 8 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. So that's what's led you into Investorist and getting all these people on board. And so how many staff do you have now?
We now have just under 20 employees around the world.
Awesome.
Yeah. So not a huge number of staff, which is good. Most of our business is in technology.
Yeah. Yeah, very cool. Well, if you're all online, then you don't need as many staff necessarily. So
yeah, correct.
Mostly the
guys.
And
we've been finding across COVID that we're actually even more efficient because we don't have to even go out to meet our clients. We can run through a lot more meetings, and it's actually making us more efficient.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I think there's a blessing in every crisis, and it's just how you look at it and how you adapt and change. So I think that's
absolutely.
It's a great attitude, and it's really interesting that you guys are being more efficient now that you're not physically going out and meeting people in person. I'm sure you missed that to some extent. So
absolutely.
So what's the future hold for Investorist? What are you really hoping to get to with it?
Well, we're reasonably strong in 4 countries around the world. I suppose over the next couple of years, we'd really love to consolidate our position there and build that network out. Australia's our home base, so we obviously want to be a big operator here, and we would love to be part of most of the off-plan property transactions that exist certainly in the most of the Western countries around the world.
Yeah. So what's the benefit? What was that? Sorry.
No, please.
I was just going to say, what's the benefit in using your platform versus going and seeing something in person? It seems to me like more Investorist. Seems like more investor type people are buying off the plan rather than like the mums and dads or first homeowners. They want to probably go and see the property in person. So what is the benefit in buying?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're buying an established property or you're buying a property to live in yourself, that's a really highly localized commodity. It's actually the most localized commodity in the world. People tend, I don't know about yourself, but most people grow up in a suburb and then they buy a place not far from where they grew up and they sort of stay in that same sort of sphere. That is how people tend to work. Or they might move to another city, they'll rent somewhere for a little while, they like the area and then they'll buy in that area. That's the way traditional property works, and people go into houses, turn taps on, and they buy something. Off-plan property is a totally different sort of commodity. It really is a global commodity, and it's more of a traded commodity with a range of different businesses in the chain. So I tell people often a story about Jimmy Chu in the Guangdong province of China, and Jimmy's sending his daughter to Melbourne University. And so in that process of him sending his daughter to Melbourne University, he's probably got an education advisor. He'll have a migration agent to help do visas. And that migration agent will probably advise on where Jimmy's daughter is going to live. And invariably, they're going to purchase an apartment for her to move into. So there's all these different people in the chain. It's quite a complicated transaction because there's cross-border, there's money transfer, and there's a totally different legislative environment if you're doing a cross-border sale.
Yeah.
Even locally, when you go to your financial planner and they say, Alyse, you're just making so much money doing these podcasts. We need to start diversifying your wealth. Let's look at some property for you. They'll probably recommend an off-plan property. One, because there is a lot more commission in it, but also because it's a lot easier for a financial planner or an advisor to recommend. You know, it's a lot more certain. Where you've got an existing property, you're going to have to get building surveyors to go out there and have a look to see are the footings right, are the foundations right, if they're cracking, is there maintenance issues. But if you buy off the plan, there's none of that. It's brand new, easy, it's simple, you've got a depreciation schedule, you know what it's going to rent for. It's kind of a bit of a no-brainer. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Well, that's exciting. I can't say I've ever looked at buying off the plan. I'm not quite at that stage yet, but as I mentioned to you last night, I've got a friend in Brisbane who sells a lot of property, house and land packages, and yeah, I think it's a fantastic way to buy. I think that there's a lot of money to be made in off the plan purchases. Obviously, am I right in saying that developers it's a good deal to buy off the plan because developers need cash in, and then also the property value goes up once the building's up in total?
Well, that's the aim. It obviously doesn't always work like that, but that's the philosophy. So typically, if you're buying an apartment, the concept is that you buy at today's value, and then within 18 months or 2 years when the property settles, hopefully you've seen an uplift in that price by the time you're paying for it.
Yeah.
If you're building or buying in a new suburb or a greenfield development, the concept again is that you buy nice and early within a development when there isn't the schools, there aren't the parks delivered, there's not that infrastructure. And then when that community becomes more established, property prices rise.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen that play out really well over the last 20 years. And certainly over the last 10 years, that's played out pretty consistently. We'll see what happens with COVID-19, whether that throws a bit of a spanner in the works. But
Might be some bargains. Might be some bargains for sale.
Look, there might be. I think at the moment the government's played a pretty good hand with their stimulus packages, and certainly for the property industry, the banks freezing loan repayments, so allowing people to suspend their loan repayments for 3 to 6 months. That will really cushion the blow for the property industry.
Yeah.
I was looking at data today that said that in Victoria, which is my home state, property sales were down 85%.
Oh, wow.
But property prices grew 0.2%. So I think people are just saying, well, why would I sell now if there's not going to be that many buyers? I can't run open for inspections. I can't do any of these sort of things.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. Whilst the normal residential market is down 85%, we're not seeing that in the off-plan property market. Again, because it's a totally different sort of commodity. People are actually still buying off-plan properties. Okay.
Mostly coming from international or within Australia, or a bit of both?
It's a bit of both. The Australian market for the last year has been 90% domestic. So that is Australians buying Australian property. The government implemented a whole lot of stamp duty imposts against foreign investors. So it's really meant that the local market's where it's at for 90% of the time.
Yeah.
That's still the same at the moment.
How's that gone with deterring or not deterring the Chinese? Because last I read, Melbourne actually had the highest Chinese ownership, more than Sydney, I think. So
right.
how's that going with the government restrictions, or have they?
I don't think the government raised stamp duties to deter Chinese property investors. I don't think that was their aim. I think the governments in Australia raised stamp duties to put some downward pressure on property prices. Okay. I don't think they were doing it to deter any one particular country of investors. I think if you look at China at the moment, they've gone through some pretty tumultuous times with COVID-19. Yeah. And that's probably deterred investors there a little bit. But the fundamentals of Australian property are still really sound, and we're still seeing purchases from that market.
Oh, that's great. Why do you think Chinese investors get a bit of a bad rap, especially in Australia?
Oh, I hate to say it, but I think Australians are racist.
I agree.
Yeah, well, I think it's Australia's got this sort of underlying racist tone, which is a bit disturbing. If you look at it, we blame Chinese investors. In Victoria, again, where I'm from, there was a lot of sort of media hype around Sudanese gangs and all these sort of things, where if you look at really where the majority of crime is committed in and the majority of issues, it's Australian people doing horrible things to other Australian people. But
yeah,
Australians kind of, I don't know, we love scapegoats, and I think Australians have a little bit of a racist undertone as well, which is disturbing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's good that I think it's good we put that out there on the table, because it's a bit of a topic of conversation in the property market from time to time. So it's good to ask the question. I think it's interesting. So we've jumped around a little bit, Jon, but going back to when you were developing and growing Investorist, and obviously you were developing the software and refining that with some staff. When did you decide, or why did you decide to bring in capital, and how did that work for you?
Oh, I actually decided to bring in capital fairly early. So we launched the platform in Melbourne.
Yeah.
And when I originally planned Investorist, I planned it as a side hustle for my ad agency.
Yeah.
So my ad agency was going pretty well. One thing about advertising agencies, they're not, I mentioned I sold it, but that exit was not amazing. They're a really good cash flow business, and they actually can be quite profitable and make you fairly good money. So that was running really quite well, and I planned this as a side hustle. Soon after launching, I had this database of 181 real estate agencies that sold off-plan property that I'd amassed over my years. And I knew those people reasonably well. And I obviously had a large network of property developers in Melbourne because that's where my agency was based. And so I ran around, I got some inventory, and I ran around and got some product on the platform. And my wife and I co-founded Investorist. So she was in the business working with me to build that up while I was sort of running the ad agency. And very, very quickly I realised that the business wouldn't be much, and it wouldn't materialise to what its potential was if we just stayed in Melbourne. Mm-hmm. So I needed to quickly expand to Sydney, to Brisbane, and open an office in China. And I just knew that I couldn't afford to do that on my own. So I developed my own IM, information memorandum, and I started running around to try and raise money.
Pitching. Very cool.
I was doing the hustle.
How did you go about finding people to pitch to? Because I can picture you with your IM and I can picture you pitching, but what happens in the middle? Do you call people and ask for referrals? How does it work when you want to pitch someone an idea or a business?
I did a lot of research on the people that I should find. It was actually really funny. It was a really funny journey. So I get a bit obsessed by things, Alyse.
Same.
So, and I just become a bit crazy. Anyway, so at the time I was obsessed around that. I thought I needed a bank to be the financial partner.
Okay.
So I basically just got on LinkedIn, found the right people in banks, and I just hustled around, found their details. I got people's mobile numbers that you probably shouldn't get, but I just got them. Yeah. And I just started calling them. And I got really close with Macquarie Bank, and I can remember it now because it was just after my birthday. And it would have been, it was in 2012, so it was just after my 32nd birthday. And I remember having my fourth meeting with the execs at Macquarie Bank, and I'd flown up to Sydney especially for this meeting, and I was totally in that business running out of money, and I needed to close an investor like then and there.
Yeah.
And I remember them saying to me, no, we can't make this decision now. We'll have to come back in about 5 months' time because there was some restructure. Because there was a restructure of their fund at Macquarie Bank.
Okay.
And it just wasn't for them then. And I was just devastated. I remember actually going down the escalators at 1 Shelley Street crying, going, oh my God, it's just all over, it's done. And I was just so upset because I thought this little baby that I'd created, this business that I just wanted to see fly, I just thought at that point, I'm going to have to close it because I can't afford to fund it and run it and do this sort of stuff because it just wasn't working. And then, interestingly enough, one of my staff was pitching the product to a property developer, and he pitched him in a cafe. And the developer said, "Look, are you looking for? I like this business. Are you looking for any money?" And he said, "Well, actually, we are." And that was how I secured my first investor,
cool.
which was Salter Capital. So that was. I got an introduction and a phone number, and I called the guy, and I went and sat down in the cafe and met David Tarascio and pitched the idea. He liked it, and they moved really quickly. A month later, they completed. They were the first investor.
Yeah. Oh, that's super cool. So your staff came to the rescue.
Staff came to the rescue, yeah. And that staff member is a guy, Rob, and he's still in Investorist today.
That's awesome. Oh, that's great. That obviously means that he really believes in the product, and so that's a really, really cool story. So now, so you've spoken about your early journey and then how it came to be, investing capital, where you want it to go. What are some of the lessons that you've learned along the way, Jon? So a lot of these podcasts, we talk about the wins, and that's awesome. It's very inspiring. But what's something that you could call a learning experience that the audience could learn from? Something that you wouldn't really want to repeat?
Oh, I think when I first started, I think for 3 years, the first 3 or 4 years of Investorist, I had this I watched a lot of entrepreneurial podcasts and things like this where you talk to founders and you hear about their business and about their philosophy and their exit. But I'd never really realized that of all of those success stories that you hear where they'd fluked there, or maybe not fluked, but they managed to have this great success, there was at least 10, if not 20 or 30 sort of cases of businesses smouldering on the pavement beside them. And so I think what we did with Investorist in the early days is, I raised $9.5 million worth of equity, which is a lot of money. Amazing. But I think we wasted a lot of it as well. Like, I think this pursuit of rapid growth and rapid expansion, like we put on lots of staff and we're really focused on, you hear a lot of tech entrepreneurs and they say, focus on your key metrics. And we knew what our key metrics were that would make us successful as a platform for our customers. And we focused solely on those key metrics. But I think to some extent in the early days, we lost a little bit of sight about the real key metric, which is your dollars and cents.
Yeah.
And, I had in the early days 2 businesses running, and that has got its own challenges as well, because I had my ad agency where I was really focused on the dollars and cents because it was to some extent funding the Investorist, but I sort of lost guidance on that. And I think when I left the ad agency and I really solely focused on Investorist, I realized, hey, we've got a lot of financial leaks in this business. We need to plug those, and that was reducing staff, and it was really focusing on the business as a business.
So what were those metrics? Like, what was the key things that you probably should have been focusing on more to bring in the dollars to make it grow?
So we were focused on user growth. So our key metrics that we focused on in the business was number of properties on platform and value of properties on platform, number of active users at any given point in time, and transactional velocity through the platform. But we weren't monetizing any of that. So we were charging, originally we were charging our SaaS model. That was working like a normal SaaS business. But in our platform, we were charging based on advertising. Advertising is very old-fashioned.
It's arbitrary too, what you charge.
Totally.
Subjective,
totally.
sorry.
And but it is. It's just you're not rewarded on the value that you create. So we were focused on creating value for our customers, but then we were not being compensated for that effort. So we had to pivot our pricing model, which we did about 2 years ago. We pivoted to a pay per value, which is more like a Google or a Facebook, where they charge per click or per impression or whatever, as opposed, sorry, not per impression, per click or per action, as opposed to
like Tinder.
Per date. And then we also started, we realized that a range of our customers weren't so good at using our platform. Like, real estate is a pretty traditional industry where people meet each other, they call each other over the phone, and they do lots of business one-to-one.
It's very relationship focused still, I feel.
Totally relationship focused. So if you meet an agent interstate, how do you start to form that relationship with them online, and how do you get that to a transaction? And so some of our customers weren't expert at that. So we realized that we should step in and actually help them with that. And that was another big change for us. How
did you help them? Did you have to coach them on building relationships, or how does that work?
No, we took it over. We just basically took over. So we said, okay, there's 2 ways you can engage with our business. One, you can pay us per date, or you can pay us per sale.
Yeah.
And that suited different businesses differently.
Yeah. So do you guys use augmented reality or VR type stuff where people can look through a property as if it's a tour online? Have you guys got that tech happening? No, that's very consumer focused technology. So our stuff is more around allowing agents to search and find the properties they're looking for and to be able to compare them with each other. So the big difference is that based more on numbers? like metrics than?
Yeah, it's based more on numbers. Yeah.
Okay.
So they tend to, and we present a lot more information. So we have the ability to link to VR tours and to different bits of, I guess, augmented reality. But in our platform, we focus on a lot of data. So if you're a customer and jumping onto REA and you're searching for a 2-bedroom flat in Wollongabba, you might get a floor plan, maybe. You probably won't know the exact price, and you'll get the contact details of a real estate agent, a couple of photos. Where on Investorist, you'll get the full price list of that development. You get every floor plan in there. You'll get every piece of information that you could possibly want on it, including a contract of sale. So it's like gigabytes of documentation for each development.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool.
That's focus.
Yeah, and it makes it more transparent. And going back to investing in property versus, the first homeowners and the mums and dads, and you're providing all the data and projection of growth and things like that.
So that's why agents like to use the platform, because they are able to deliver better advice to their customers. So before Investorist, an advisor would have to just rely on the relationships that they developed with 4 or 5 different developers or with one project marketer. And that's really hard to be able to deliver decent advice to your customers when you're just buying from that small pool of suppliers. Yeah. Where if you've got a really wide net of suppliers and you can go anywhere you like. Yeah. Can help you make better recommendations.
So what does it take for you guys to get into more countries?
Oh, it's actually quite challenging. So every different country you move into has got a different legislative environment. Mm-hmm. And really importantly, it's got a different culture. So if you look at our entry to the US market, which was really hard for us, it was very, very bumpy. The US market has a totally different business culture to the Australian market. Yeah. In particular, they don't have people that work in the company in the sales teams that are salary employees. They're all commission only. Okay. So you see these companies that have got a sales team of 1,000 people. Well, none of those people are on the payroll. So if you go and say to those sales organizations, hey, do you want to invest in your future, and do you want to invest in technology, and do you want to grow your network of foreign agents or even local agents? The answer there is just no, because we don't have any money that we're spending on innovation, and we don't have any people to run systems or establish relationships. It's all just the next deal and the next deal, which is why the American market, companies like Compass have just come in and gone, well, hold on, we're going to raise equity from investors and billions of dollars worth of it. We're going to invest it in technology, and they've just taken over that market. Yeah. But most businesses in that market, or most real estate sales businesses, they're not investing in tech systems and technology and people.
Wow. You'd think that America would be more forward thinking than that. Often Australia is the one behind the US with tech, but.
Oh, and it totally looks like that. Like, I went on a tour there before we entered that market. We did a whole research paper. We engaged a research company. We went and visited a whole heap of people in that market, booked ourselves meetings across the country, decided to establish in Miami. And we just got it so wrong, because everything they say is they talk about innovation and loving it and wanting to do it. And then you ask them to,
put the money where their mouth is.
Yeah, give me 50 grand for that. And the answer is no.
Right.
So it's just really different. Or even the ones that did stump up the cash and pay for the product, then having the back staff to resource that solution, there just wasn't the depth. It was really, it's really a bit of a facade there.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Oh, well, it's fascinating hearing that coming from technology after, Silicon Valley is one of the hubs of the world and things like that. But
well, I think it's different industries. Sure. I think if you look at the tech business, they invest massively in technology. It's just when it comes to real estate, I think the real estate market is a bit
different.
It's just very different there. It's very different. And that's the thing. It's not saying that it's worse. It's just culturally different. And understanding those different cultural norms is quite challenging when you enter new markets.
Yeah. So obviously the challenge is for you to get your fingers in more pieces of the pie around the world. Means navigating the cultural differences, understanding the climate and the market over in those countries. So it sounds like it's going to take a lot of time, but it's worth it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So for the listeners out there, and obviously you yourself love property, you've been in it for a long time. What do you personally like investing in, or what's your plan for investment? So some people love stocks, bonds, REITs. Some people love physical property. What's your opinion on investing, and what's a great strategy to set yourself up for life?
I love property. I bought my first property when I was 19, and
in Melbourne.
I've just kept in Albury. So where I grew up in Albury, I got a job when I was just about to turn 18 for a local bank there, and I worked there for a year. I saved my first deposit, and I bought a 3-bedroom house, the worst house on the best street in Albury.
Yeah.
It wasn't actually even the best street. It was a pretty crummy street, and it was a pretty crummy house, but it was really cheap and I could afford it. So I bought that when I was 19. I actually owned that property until I was 35, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, I owned it for a long time.
Was that a strategy, or did you just wing it?
I wish I'd never sold it. So the only real estate decisions that I've ever regretted has been selling them.
Yeah, I hear Grant Cardone says, don't sell, just hold and keep growing your portfolio.
Don't sell. So look, I really like property, and I guess I sold Albury because it wasn't a blue chip property in my mind. So I like, my strategy of what I like is quality properties in quality areas. So I always look for, a building that is, if I'm investing into a building that is an apartment building, I look for a really good quality building. I look for something that would have more owner occupiers than just investors. And I try and buy something that's good. So for example, I wouldn't buy into a building that had loads of 1-bedroom apartments because I know that's going to be an investor-centric property. I'd buy into a building that had predominantly 2- and 3-bedroom apartments. And when I pick suburbs, I like to buy in suburbs that I think have got a good long-term story. And that's around, that's around people loving to live and work and play in that particular area.
Yeah, so something with all the different facilities and dining out options and all the big shopping centres and outlets that are available. Yeah, so you've got a lifestyle in that suburb. Oh, that's
absolutely, yeah. Yeah, so I own some places in St Kilda, which is also where I live, and I love that suburb, and because I think it has.
Yeah, I love it too.
It's a cool place, and so I like property there. But I think what defines a good property strategy is really understanding what you need to get out of your property. Mm-hmm. So it will differ depending on the stage in life that someone is and their income. So if I look at my first property investment, it wasn't blue chip, it wasn't a blue chip area, and it wasn't a great property, but it was cheap.
Yeah.
It was cheap, and it was going to be reasonably cash flow, or it was cash flow positive. So that was the right strategy for me at that time. And for lots of investors coming into the market, their strategy has to be, well, I'm going to buy a cash flow positive property today. Because some
people want negative geared properties as well. So like you said, it's based off what
they do, but I think there's negative gearing and then there's negative gearing. Like if you're actually buying a negatively geared property, that doesn't feel like a great investment strategy to me because you're really punting on capital growth. So I think if you're going to have a negative gearing strategy, it should be primarily an on-paper negative gearing strategy that you use for tax minimisation. Yeah. But just buying a property to be negatively geared, I think is a I think that's just a way of reducing your wealth.
Yeah, right.
But I think when you're looking at property, if you find something in an area that you think will do reasonably well, and there is reasonable parity between what it costs you to own that property and what you're going to get in terms of income, and you're just playing the capital growth game, then history has shown that you should double your money in 10 years.
Yeah.
But if you're there saying, well, I'm going to have this property and I'm going to negatively gear it and I'm going to save on my tax, and I don't know.
Sounds, yeah. Again, yeah, some of the best property guys I've listened to talk about cash flow, and that's important. So it makes sense.
It's totally important because your circumstances change as well over time. Yeah. And sometimes you want to access, like we were talking before about banks freezing mortgages. I think had banks not, had the government not forced banks to freeze mortgages, we would find the property market at the moment would be an absolute bloodbath.
I agree. Yeah.
People's circumstances have changed dramatically. And if you're in a whole lot of negatively geared property and your circumstances have changed dramatically, well, what buffer have you got? What margin?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Well, yeah, that's very interesting. And for obviously the listeners, it's not financial advice, but it is something that
it's not financial advice.
It is something that we just wanted to chat about, and a strategy that Jon thinks is, in his perception, is a good one. So again, it's not financial advice, but yeah, okay, cool. Well, Jon, I like to flip the interview for one question. So tell me, is there anything you'd like to ask me? Anything that you think would be a benefit to the listeners or to yourself? Hit me with a question.
Yeah, Alyse, I guess you were saying that a lot of people ask you about the why, but yeah. I'm not going to ask you about the why. I would like to know what your future is. What does your next 5-10 years look like?
So right now, with the Trillions podcast, which is obviously what we're on right now, it's one of the times in my life where I haven't had a strict plan to something. I find the best I've done when I've looked back on my life is when I've had a vision for the future, which I have, and I'll touch on that in a sec, but let myself get there by living the journey and enjoying it along the way. So I'm not forcing anything with this podcast. I have had a couple of people approach me to sponsor it, which was a great surprise after just 10 episodes. And I'm really loving meeting people like yourself and other entrepreneurs and business people from all around the world. And that's something that I've loved doing since I was a teenager, young and at university in Brisbane. I was constantly networking, going out, meeting people, and now I get to do it online and in person with the podcast. So if the podcast makes money, fantastic. Otherwise, I'm really happy to share stories for other entrepreneurs to listen to and learn from. That's why I try to ask questions about your learnings rather than just all the successes, so that people can actually, learn and hear the pros and the cons of various business models and industries. So that's the podcast. I've also, I believe, got an interesting story in my life. I recently watched Molly's Game, which is a story about Molly Bloom. Have you seen it?
No, I haven't.
So when she was 26, she was running one of the highest stakes poker games, underground poker games in LA and New York in the US, with minimum buy-ins of 250,000, people losing multiple millions in one hand. So she was a hustler, and I was really inspired by her. She wrote a book that got turned into a movie, and I believe I have a really interesting life story. So I've started chipping away at a book. As for a specific business model of how I'm going to get to where I want to be, I'm not sure. I see myself speaking in front of thousands of people at some point. I see myself as making multiple millions of dollars and inspiring other people to go forth and be fearless in their pursuit of creating great businesses, because that's how you do those kinds of things. But in what industry, I'm not 100% sure just yet. I just see myself impacting the world in a big way at this stage.
That's great. My wife is a member of a really cool organization called Business Chicks.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you've heard of it, but they often have lots of really inspirational women speakers getting up, talking about how why they got to where they got and created and something amazing.
Yeah. Well, I had this idea in my head, Jon, that for some reason I shouldn't write my book. The books don't make a lot of money. I put it in the art category. It's a very artistic, creative thing to write a book, but I'm a fantastic writer. I have some incredible stories that not many people know about, I'd really like to get out there, because I believe if other women or other people, men as well, read my story and see myself pushing through these challenges that I've had, then they will, they'll give themselves permission to move forward as well. I think that's a powerful thing.
I think not everything you do in your life needs to make money. Like I'm a passionate kite surfer, and I do that as often as possible. I'm not particularly great at it, and it's never going to make me any money, but it's certainly something that I like to invest a lot of my time into.
Yeah. And I think often in the past, I've had mentors say to me, how are you going to monetize that? How are you going to monetize that? So sometimes it's in the back of my mind, but I think it's great just to do things that we love in life. And good point about the money. So lastly, Jon, is there anything that you've experienced on your journey that you'd like to share with the listeners that you think that they could really learn from or keep in mind when they think of you?
Oh, that's an interesting question.
Well, what kind of legacy do you want to leave when you're gone?
Oh, well, I look at every decision that I make in business or my personal life, and I always think, would I be proud of this and proud of leaving it? So I guess my legacy, I want to leave something that I'm proud of. So that is not for me necessarily money. I know you interview people and they talk a lot about money. I guess for me, I want to leave a legacy of adding value to a range of people's lives. So that's with my staff. I mentioned to you the other day, I'm designing some houses. I think a lot of houses in Australia look pretty average. I'm passionate about design. So I want to build some really nice looking houses. So it's really for me, my legacy is about doing good things and being proud of what I'm doing and
having fun along the way, by the sound.
Having fun and enjoying my time with my family. I've got a little boy who's 2, who's amazing.
It sounds like too what you're doing with Investorist. You're really helping. Obviously people can already invest. People can already invest in Australia and between countries, but you're making it easier for people and you're connecting people that maybe otherwise wouldn't have been connected. So, and that's all via a platform that you, that initially was a concept in your mind and now it physically exists, which is really cool to think about. It's the same as the iPhone, once just an idea in someone's mind that now exists physically in the world. So I think anybody who brings ideas to life is a magician. It's very cool.
Yeah, so I think my legacy, I just want to keep creating and keep doing good things and surround myself with really good people and just have a nice time.
Yeah, that's what life's about.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast, Jon. It's been a pleasure having you on.
It's been great to be on. Thank you so much, Alyse. It was lovely to meet you.
No worries. And I look forward to meeting you in person in Melbourne sometime.
That sounds great, when you're actually allowed to travel.
Yes. I can't wait to get back on a plane.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Jon.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.